Howdy Doomtown fans, Willingdon here, and I am excited to be reviewing Faith and Fear. This is the first Pine Box expansion for Doomtown Reloaded, and if you're not familiar with the format, the Pine Boxes are going to be 40 new cards for the game. This is opposed to 21 that we usually see in the Saddlebag expansions. This larger format is going to allow for the introduction of very new ideas into the game. We're going to see a new type of spell called Miracles, as well as blessed dudes who can cast them. We're also going to see a new outfit for all 4 of the factions in the game. In this first part of the review, we're going to be looking at those 4 new outfit cards, as well as all of the dudes that are in the box. And in the second part of the video, we'll be looking at all the rest of the cards. We're going to kick things off with the new outfit card for the 4th ring. This is called Oddities of Nature. It's 18 with 3 income. Your Abomination dudes get +1 influence while in the town square. And then it has Noon Boot. Boot your Abomination in the town square to gain a Ghost Rock. Boot an opposing dude in the town square. Well, this is certainly quite a bit different than the original outfit. I'm not sure how much I actually like this one, especially compared to the other 3, but I do think that this is really interesting as an option for the 4th ring players. The Abominations generally don't have a ton of influence, so just getting more influence, especially since you're probably going to have several Abominations, is going to be really nice. At the same time, I feel like 4th ring generally doesn't have a whole lot of trouble with influence, although I think that's largely because they don't play a lot of Abominations right now. This seems pretty decent to me. It's going to be a lot easier to meet the condition on the card than it is with the regular 4th ring, especially early in the game. The ability to boot opposing dudes in the town square is going to be really strong, but the fact that you just have to get your Abomination to the town square to take advantage of the Ghost Rock effect, that to me seems like it's going to be a lot easier to pull off, especially in the first turn or two, than the 4th ring ability is. A lot of times there's kind of a dance in the early game with 4th ring currently where they're trying to just get into the town square or just leave home so that they can pull off a spell and then retreat and be safe at home. This is not going to have to, you're not going to be as worried about that, I don't think, since your Abominations are generally a lot more disposable. Now, right now, there aren't a ton of Abominations in the game, but there are some pretty decent ones, and I think that this is the type of ID that's just going to get better over time because we're going to see new and strong Abominations released. I really hope that this makes for some more aggressive 4th ring decks. I think one of the things that I'm kind of irked with a lot of the current 4th ring decks is that they tend to be pretty passive until they get their spells deployed and get kind of their equipment set up, and then they're generally in control of the game from there. This type of 4th ring deck is probably going to be a lot more aggressive from the onset, and is probably going to be a lot more willing to get into regular shootouts than the normal 4th ring is. So I think this is going to be a lot less spell focused, though still inclusive of spells, and it's going to be a lot more about actual shootouts than, we see with the regular 4th ring. The next outfit we're looking at is the Arsenal. This is the new Law Dogs outfit. It's 19 with 3 income. It has Noon Repeat, boot a gadget or spell attached to your dude, and have them call out an unbooted or wanted dude. This is very different from the original Law Dogs ability, but it does have some similarities. First of all, we're going to have either a gadget or a spell, and that's going to largely either be some of the gadgets that we were already able to invent with our Law Dogs Mad Scientists, or it's going to be miracles. And as we look at the Law Dogs dudes in this box, we're going to see that the Law Dogs get a lot of stuff to deal with these new miracle spells. Now, the one thing to really point out about this is the Noon Repeat ability. I don't think you're actually going to be able to pull this off more than like 2 or 3 times in a turn, but the fact that you can actually use this ability more than once in a turn, I think has a lot of potential for like a game-ending play, or just a really strong effect. Like after the board has developed and both players have deployed dudes and equipped them and are kind of in that mid to late game stage, I think that's where we're going to see this really shine. And I have a feeling that if you're able to actually pull this off more than once or twice in a turn, you're going to probably win the game, or the game's going to end as a result of that. Now, I said it was similar to the original Law Dogs in some respects, and I think the main similarity that they have is that both of the abilities largely allow you to break the rules of when you're able to call out dudes. The original Law Dogs ability is mainly used in conjunction with something like Bounty Hunter, where you're able to give a wanted dude who's at home or trying to, hide at home and not get called out. You're able to give him a bounty, and then you're going to later be able to call him out with Bounty Hunter, and hopefully you're going to have some other dudes eligible to join that posse as well. Now, this is going to require that you actually have a dude in place to do this kind of thing. You're not going to generate a token dude like you would with Bounty Hunter. Another thing is you're going to have to come up with a way to make the guy wanted. It seems pretty easy to call out the unbooted dudes. That seems like a pretty obvious effect. But if their dude is unbooted, they're going to be able to do things like chicken out or use some kind of boot effect to devastate you in combat. So an unbooted dude is definitely going to be a lot better protected than, the potentially just a wanted dude would be. But since you're no longer going to have the wanted ability, the ability to generate bounties integrated into the outfit, I think it's going to be a lot harder to do that. Right now, I'm not sure that I'm going to be trying this out too much. I really just think that Bounty Hunter is so strong and is just a really compelling reason to play Law Dogs with the original outfit. But I think if we see some more emerging spell-oriented or mad scientist-oriented Law Dogs decks, this could absolutely be the cornerstone of them, and I think has a lot of potential to be really, really game-changing, probably even more so than the regular Law Dogs ability. The next outfit is for Morgan Cattle Company. This is Morgan Gadgetorium. It is an 18+3 React Boot. Before pulling for a skill check, increase the difficulty by 2. If successful, gain 1 Ghost Rock and unboot the dude if they booted to use this skill or ability. If you've listened to my reviews in the past, you've heard me whine about how I thought that the gadget strategies were a little too weak. And I think that this is really the reason why I felt that way, because this card really completes the gadget strategies in my opinion. The fact that with this, you're going to potentially be able to invent 2 gadgets a turn, perhaps even more, that's going to be really, really strong. You're going to be able to use 1 mad scientist to create 2 gadgets a turn, and the cost is really just the difficulty being increased by 2, which I think is really going to be manageable if your whole deck is based around gadgets, which it's going to have to be if you're playing this outfit. So I see that being such a minor penalty for the increased effect of you not only gaining the Ghost Rock, but being able to invent 2 gadgets. I think the Ghost Rock is kind of just icing on the cake. I feel like the ability to invent 2 gadgets, that alone is really, really strong. Or even just something like inventing a gadget and then having that guy like move around and deliver the gadget to the guy that really needs it, or something like that. Like, just in general, this is going to make it a lot easier to use the gadgets, and I think potentially is going to make the gadget strategies a real thing in the metagame. I've really wanted to play something like Flamethrower or a lot of these gadgets. There's just been so many cool gadgets, but I've always kind of whined about how I thought their power level was low, and this is going to be a solution to that. I think this is really going to have a lot of appeal in the Morgan Cattle Company gadget decks, and I think is really the strongest card that we've seen to date for those strategies. The last of the 4 new outfit cards is Desolation Row. This is the Sloan Gang one. It's a 17 with +3. Your dudes with 4 or more bounty are worth +1 control point. And then it has Noon Job boot this card to mark the town square. If successful, and your leader is still in the posse, give them 2 bounty and then gain Ghost Rock equal to their bullet rating to a maximum of 4. I'm not sure that this is the most powerful of the new outfit abilities, but it's the one that I'm the most excited about. I think this is going to make a lot of cards that were in the core set a lot more viable and playable from the Sloan Gang perspective. I'm especially thinking of the Ames brothers, who I think have had a limited amount of playability, as well as some other cards. There haven't been a lot of incentives to put tons of bounties on our dudes, and for the most part, having bounties on the dudes has been kind of more of a drawback than it has an advantage, even though we have several cards that allow us to do something with bounties. This is going to be a really, really strong incentive for getting lots of bounties on your guys. I really, really like how what we're going to be able to do with this is slowly pile up bounties on a variety of dudes, either by getting in shootouts or playing a variety of jobs or other things. And we're going to accumulate these control points. And that's really going to push us towards this inevitable victory. So if our opponent isn't able to off some of our dudes, especially some of our like tier 2 dudes, like, you know, the Ames or whatnot, we're going to be able to get control points on those guys. And that's really going to be hard to fight, especially as we're taking control of their deeds and rapidly getting a lot of control points. This looks pretty scary. Now, we also have the Noon Job ability, which is really strong as well. The fact that you can put the 2 bounties on a guy, I think a lot of times is going to be an advantage. And I think that it's almost trivial to get to the 4 bullets to get the maximum benefit out of this thing. Sloan Gang is pretty good at doing that. So I'm thinking that a huge majority of the time when you're using this ability, you're going to be getting all 4 Ghost Rock. That's really, really good. So in general, I see this being the main way to play Sloan Gang for the conceivable future. And in my opinion, this is quite a bit better than the original outfit ability. Now we're going to start looking at the dudes. And the first one that we have is for 4th ring. It is Pagliaccio. He is a 2 of spades, 2 to play with no upkeep. He's got 1 draw and no influence. He's an abomination and he's non-unique. We haven't seen a whole lot of that. He has shootout boot, 1 opposing dude, gets -1 bullets, and -1 value. This isn't exactly the most exciting dude of all time, but I do think it has quite a bit of interaction. Works especially well with the new outfit that we saw for 4th ring. I think in general, this is just going to be a nice additional guy to just have with no upkeep. It's going to be easy to play one of these guys down. He's pretty disposable. His shootout ability is pretty decent. And I think as we see more and more things that interact with abominations, this guy's going to make a lot of sense. I like that he comes with a bullet. I would have, I guess, maybe expected him not to come with one, given how cheap he is. And if you're going to also have him in the new outfit, you're potentially going to also have him worth an influence, maybe possibly gaining you a Ghost Rock every turn, potentially booting a dude that's also in the town square. So I think this guy's pretty decent. I think this is going to be a nice throwaway guy for 4th ring, and I think the fact that he is a non-unique abomination is going to be really useful. So this is not exactly an exciting dude, but I think one with a lot of playability. The next dude that we have is also 4th ring. Her name is Valaria Botten. She is a 4 of spades, 4 to play with no upkeep. She's a 0 stud with 1 influence. Huckster 1. Valaria can invent mystical gadgets using her Huckster skill. Well, here we have another reasonably decent Huckster 1. No upkeep. That alone's pretty decent, but I think this mystical gadget thing is really the appeal for her. Now, right now in the game, we don't have a lot of mystical gadgets. We're just looking at the Holy Wheel Gun, but there is another mystical gadget later in this box, so I think that maybe we will revisit this a bit then. But I think this is the type of thing where, as there are more mystical gadgets released that are potentially good for 4th ring, this is increasingly going to move into like playability as a starter. Right now, I'm not sure it's going to be worth it, especially if all we were getting was the Holy Wheel Gun. But I think when we see this other mystical gadget later in the box, it's going to make a little bit more sense why she would be playable as a starting dude. The next dude is also 4th ring, and it is Mieka Reese. We've seen this guy before. He's now a 9 of spades. He's 7 to play with no upkeep. He's 1 stud and 1 influence. This is experienced 1, and he's huckster 1 as well. He has shootout, boot a hex or mystical goods attached to Mieka to give an opposing dude -3 value. I think this guy pretty instantly has a lot of playability. Mieka Reese is already one of the most popular starters, I would say. At least is definitely in the running for most popular starters for 4th ring, just because he has no upkeep, he's got a huckster ability, he's pretty cheap, and he gives you that influence still. But the thing that really sucks about him, at least the original one, is that he has an incredibly low value. Now, this value is now 9. After he gets a little bit of experience, he's going to gain a massive value jump, and that's going to be really, really nice. Also, the fact that he has this shootout ability, I would argue maybe isn't as useful as his original ability, depending on the context, but I think this ability is a lot more powerful, just because the -3 value is going to be another source of value reduction. So we already have several ways to reduce value of guys. This is just going to be another source of decreasing a guy's value. And that, I think, is going to potentially be very strong if we could pile up lots of negative values on one very powerful dude that we're trying to get rid of on the opposing side. That makes things like the Soul Blast or just lots of other value-oriented effects a lot stronger. So I see this guy being very playable in a lot of 4th ring decks, the more traditional 4th ring decks using the original outfit, just because we were probably already playing Mieka anyway, and this is just going to be a nice way to not only increase his value without increasing his upkeep, but also give him this nice little shootout ability when we're ready to start engaging. Now we're moving on to the Law Dogs dudes, and the first one that we have is Reverend Perry in body. He's a 3 of spades, 3 to play with no upkeep. He's 0 draw, 0 influence. Bless 2. Noon boot. Perry makes a blessed skill check of difficulty 9. If successful, unboot Perry and a Law Dog at this or an adjacent location. Well, we haven't actually looked at the miracles yet, but the miracles are going to largely surround the Law Dogs, and I think this guy is going to be a cornerstone of the way that we think about playing with blessed dudes. If you're playing lots of miracles, I think you're pretty much guaranteed to be considering this guy at least as a starter. I think he's pretty easily going to be your default blessed guy. His noon boot ability is really, really strong. The fact that you can unboot Law Dogs at an adjacent location as well as the location he's in. And the difficulty 9 pull is, I guess, kind of difficult. But I think that if you're making a deck based on these miracles, a lot of the miracles have really high difficulties anyway. So you're probably going to have a very high pulling deck anyway. So I don't really see that being a huge disadvantage. Really, the worst thing that this guy has going for him is the fact that he has no bullets and no influence. The no influence is going to maybe be a big deal, but I think the fact that he only eats up 3 of your starting income is going to really make him playable. You're still going to have plenty left over to play some other dudes. So I really like this guy. I think this is a really good design. I think Bless 2 is really going to be good, especially with the miracles that we're going to see later. And his noon boot ability is really strong as well. All around, I think this is a really good spellcaster for the Law Dogs faction. The next dude is also a Law Dog. Her name is Zoe Halbrook. She's a Jack of Spades, 4 to play with 1 upkeep. She has 0 draw and 2 influence. Mad Scientist 0. Zoe can only invent weapon gadget cards. And she gets a bonus to her Mad Scientist skill equal to the number of deputies at her location. Well, if the Mad Scientist Law Dogs was maybe a possibility before. I think it certainly is now that we have Zoe. There's a lot of things going for this girl. She's cheap. She has 1 upkeep, which is pretty doable, and you also get 2 influence, so her just general stats are pretty good. But this mad scientist thing is really, really good. The fact that you're going to be able to invent a lot of different strong weapon gadgets. I think my pick is probably auto revolver, but there's certainly some other choices as well. I think right now there's somewhat of an incentive to play some of these just because they're really good weapons compared to the non-gadget versions. But I think in general, we're probably going to need a few more of these weapon gadgets for her to really be like a starter or something that's going to be your main like core of your strategy. I really like this card. I think that it has a lot of possibility in the future, and I think there's already a few ways to build around it. The next Law Dog is Abram Growth. We've seen this guy before, except now he is a Queen of Spades. He's 7 to play with 1 upkeep. He's 2 stud and 1 influence. He's Deputy, Experienced 1, and Blessed 1. Abram cannot use his ability in the first round of a shootout, and that ability is Shootout. Abram gets +1 bullets, boot all weapons in the opposing posse, and reduce their bullet bonuses to 0. I wasn't especially wild about Abram Growth in the core set, and I'm not exactly wild about this either, but I do see it having some limited playability. Especially since he's Blessed 1, I see this fitting pretty well into the miracle-oriented strategy, just so you have access to another caster. There aren't exactly a lot of casters, and we're going to see the rest of them later. But, I mean, you're not going to have a ton of options when it comes to Blessed dudes, at least until we see some more. So, I think maybe that alone is going to make him worth playing in the right deck. I also really like that he has this shootout ability. It's limited in that you aren't going to be able to use it the first round, which is generally going to mean that any sort of boot abilities that those weapons have are going to get to be used before you get to use his ability. That said, the reducing of the bullet bonuses from the weapons to 0, that alone seems pretty good. A lot of weapons have at least like +2, so you're going to potentially reduce their draw hand by a huge amount by firing off this ability. I think this guy maybe has some limited playability. I like that he's a really high value, works well with the miracle strategy. In general, I think that this guy is going to see some play. I'm just not super excited about it like I was with Perry. Now we've got a dude for Morgan Cattle Company. This is William Specs. He is an ace of spades. He's 3 to play with 1 upkeep. He's 1 draw and 1 influence. Mad Scientist 2. Noon boot. Play a ranch or out of town deed or invent a gadget. Reduce the cost by William's Mad Scientist skill. Holy cow. This guy is really strong. I really, really like this guy. I think he's got a ton of playability right out of the box. Mad Scientist 2 for a cheap guy with also an influence, and you do have to pay that upkeep. He's got a really low value, so there are some issues with his stats. But this noon boot ability is just insane. We're already going to probably be playing ranches. We're likely going to already be playing out-of-town deeds as well. And if we're playing Mad Scientist stuff, we're going to have gadgets as well. The fact that we can reduce the cost of those things by his Mad Scientist skill, even if we're just getting 2, which is what he starts with, that's going to be good. But there's a lot of ways in the game, or at least several ways in the game, to increase his Mad Scientist skill as well. So we might be able to boost him with like the Morgan Research Institute or something like that. And then we're going to get even more of a discount when we're playing these things. I think this guy's really strong. He has some potential as a starter. I think he's reasonable to include in your deck as well. Even though that low value is really going to hurt your Mad Scientist abilities, I'm probably going to be trying this guy as a starter. And I think this guy has a lot of potential in the Mad Scientist gadget-oriented Morgan decks. Next, we have another Morgan Cattle Company dude who might also fit that style of deck. This is Chuan Jen Key. She is a 5 of spades, 3 to play with 1 upkeep. She's 0 stud and 1 influence, mad scientist 0. While Jen has a horse, she gets +1 influence, and while Jen has a gadget, she gets +2 bullets. As the artwork and flavor text would suggest, this gal is really going to like a mechanical horse. Basically, we're going to be looking to equip her with horses and gadgets, and I think mechanical horse is pretty obviously the easiest way to do that since it counts as both. We're probably going to be playing mechanical horse in our gadget deck pretty much no matter what, just because it's one of the stronger gadgets. It allows for a lot of mobility, and if we have things in our deck that interact with horses, which I think we likely will, it's going to work for those as well. I'm not 100% sure that this chick's going to see a ton of play, but I think it's going to be pretty easy to include her in a deck that already has a lot of gadget stuff. The only thing that really is going against her is the fact that she's only going to be a 5 value on pulls, but I think that's even pretty workable for a lot of gadgets since you're mainly going to be using like Mad Scientist 2, and some of the difficulties like on the mechanical horse aren't that high. Not maybe the most exciting card, but the fact that she's another mad scientist, she's got some decent stats, and she's going to get massive if we have a horse for her and a gadget for her. I think she's pretty decent. The next Morgan dude is Lane Healy, and he's experienced now. He's a 10 of spades. He's 8 to play with 2 upkeep. He's 2 stud and 3 influence, experienced 1. Noon. Boot Lane's horse to choose an opposing dude at an adjacent deed. Boot that dude, Lane moves to that deed and calls out the chosen dude. I was a fan of the original Lane Healy. I thought he was pretty monstrous when you gave him like a Mustang or something, and this is just going to make him even better in my opinion. It's basically a built-in run 'em down, which I think was already a really, really strong action ability. It can be really unpredictable, and it can be terrifying when it just comes out and destroys one of your important dudes. Having that built into a guy is going to be really, really strong. I don't know, I really like this. It seems extremely powerful, and I'm just trying to figure out, exactly where and when and how to construct this deck. I will say this is probably one of the best effects I can think of to use good stiff drink on, just because if you're able to do this ability more than once and you succeed at more than one shootout, that's pretty much just going to be GG. I think that this guy has a lot of ability to crack a sort of stagnated board state, and I think he just all around is going to be an extremely good play if you're already able to include this type of thing in your deck. Now we're getting to the Sloan Gang, and the first one we have is quite the monster. This is the Fixer. It's an ace of spades, 2 to play with 3 upkeep, 4 draw, and 2 influence. He's a grifter, which means you can only have 1 grifter in your starting posse. React Boot. At the start of the game, discard 5 cards from your deck. You may place one of those cards in your hand. If that card was an action card that starts a job, unboot the Fixer. This guy is pretty monstrous. He's got insane stats with the 4 draw and 2 influence for only 2. He does have a low value, and the 3 upkeep is going to be a huge pain in the butt, especially since you're thinking about starting this guy since he has the Grifter ability. But that Grifter ability he has is really, really good. First of all, you're going to be able to basically choose whatever the best card of the top 5 cards of your deck is. That seems really, really good just because it's going to fix your hand, right? I mean, as the name would imply. You're going to get the thing you need to ensure that you have like a deed to play or a dude to play or, a weapon or hopefully a job. Now, most of the aggressive Sloan Gang decks play a ton of jobs. I think the Sloan Gang decks I've been playing play at least like 8 to 10 jobs. I think it's realistic that you could play even more than that. So I think there's a fair amount of time when you are actually going to get to unboot him because of that action card job thing. The next Sloan dude that we have is Maria Kingsford. She is 2 of spades, 3 to play with 0 upkeep. She is 1 draw and 1 influence. She's Huckster 0. Add Maria's bounty to each Huckster skill check she makes while in a shootout. The Sloan Huckster deck has sort of been a pet deck for me. I've never really got it to work that well, and I think that's mainly because it's really hard to start with Jose Morales, who is really like the only really strong Huckster guy that we have. I think Maria here is undeniably better than him as a starter for that deck, and I think she also interacts really, really well with the new outfit ID. We're going to have to play lots of cards that increase our bounty, and I think that that's not really much of a limit. I think this chick has a lot of playability in that type of deck. I think you're probably going to be using the new outfit, and I think in general this is just a nice, maybe not the most exciting card, but a nice card to kind of round out a strategy that has sort of existed, but has only been kind of limitedly playable because just the card pool wasn't all the way there. The next Sloan dude that we have is Mchao Kaleo, Esquire. He is a 6 of spades, 3 to play with 0 upkeep. He is 0 draw and 1 influence. He has noon, move 1 bounty from one of your dudes to another one of your dudes. This guy isn't insanely powerful, but his ability seems extremely useful, especially with the new outfit where having that 4 bounty is going to be the threshold to get the control point. I think that this has a lot of playability in that deck. We're looking at a cheap dude with no upkeep who's still worth an influence, which is pretty important for Sloan Gang since they're generally not that good at influence. I think this guy has a lot of potential as either a starter or just a dude that you play cheaply in your deck. He has a decent value, which means if you're doing like the Huckster thing or something like that, I think the 6 is probably going to be good enough for most of the spells that you're playing. All around, I think that this guy is maybe a little underwhelming, but is just like the type of thing that is going to fix a lot of problems that your deck may have had. And I think his ability is just going to be really useful. You're easily going to use it every turn. He doesn't even have to boot to do it. I just really like this guy. He's not exactly powerful. He's not exactly exciting, but I think that he's very playable and very decent. Next, we have some neutral dudes, and we also have the introduction of a new and fairly interesting mechanic. This first one is called Sister Lois Otwell. She is an 8 of spades, 6 to play with no upkeep. She's 2 draw and 1 influence. She's Union, and that's the new mechanic I was talking about, and she's Blessed 0. Shootout, boot a miracle on Sister Lois to give a dude in your posse +1 bullets and +3 value. Before I talk about her specifically, let's talk about these new keywords. The first one that we're seeing here is Union, and you might be able to predict that the other one we're going to have is Confederate. Basically, the way that these work is that we can't bring new cards into play if we own one of the opposite type. So in other words, if I already own a Union dude, I'm not able to bring into play a Confederate dude, no matter what. And I think this is going to be kind of interesting because it seems like they're going to constrain it mainly to the neutral dudes, which is going to give them a lot of ways to make really powerful dudes that don't interact with other powerful dudes. So I like this keyword. I think it's maybe a little obscure. I wish that maybe there was some like reminder text or something on these new cards. But I do really like how they have a big section on it in the pamphlet, the little story thing that came with the game. And it's really clearly explained there. So I really like that. Now, talking specifically about Sister Lois, I think that she's probably going to have some playability. It's nice to have a neutral blessed dude in the game. I feel like that's just something that very obviously needs to exist if we're going to introduce a new type of spell casting in the game. And she has some pretty good stats, especially with the no upkeep and the influence with the bullets and everything. So I think there's probably a fair amount of playability. The worst thing I think she has going for her is the fact that she's 8 of spades. That's just such a good value. She is going to be competing with some cards like Stephen Wiles. So, I don't know. I think that this is just a nice card to have in the game. I'm not immediately sure if I'm going to be playing it. It's probably going to easily slot into the Law Dogs Blessed deck just to have another Blessed dude. Speaking of neutral Blessed dudes, the next one is Felix Amador. He is a 9 of spades, 6 to play with 1 upkeep. He is 1 draw and 2 influence. He's Confederate, and he's blessed 2. Noon, boot a miracle attached to Felix to look at the top card of your deck. I like this guy a little bit better than Sister Lois, just because I think the Noon ability that he has is going to be a lot more universally good versus her ability. And the fact that he's blessed 2, he does have an upkeep, but you're getting that 2 influence as a trade out. I think the Noon ability that he has, like I was saying, is going to be really useful because you're going to know what you're going to pull on your next card. So that might be really useful if you're planning on making a powerful miracle play. And once we look at the miracles, we're going to see that a lot of them have very high requirements, very high difficulties. So it's going to be nice to know for sure that you're going to make the pull. Or if you have like a variable pull thing where, you know, you need to pull X number or higher, it's going to be nice to know the result of that ahead of time. So, I don't know, I see this as maybe having some playability again in the miracle-oriented decks, just because it's another nice Blessed 2 dude who has like a semi-relevant ability and the 2 influence. The last dude is definitely one that will make old players smile. This is Nico Dimas Whateley. He is a queen of spades. He's 7 to play with 3 upkeep. He's 1 stud and 3 influence. He's a huckster 3. While your dudes are at an in-town deeds, they gain the ability Noon Boot. If this dude has 1 or more influence, give Nicodemus a control point. At the end of sundown, or if he is ever at home, Nicodemus loses all his control points. This guy, on one hand, is going to be extremely difficult to use and get value out of, but on the other hand, seems like one of the best game enders in the game, one of the best finishers in the game. That ability that he gives all of your other dudes who have at least 1 influence to just give him a bunch of control points seems really, really good. If your opponent is in a situation where they can't contest either him or your dudes, you're going to be able to just boot them down and potentially spike up your control points really high. And the fact that he's also a huckster is going to be really nice because it's going to give you a lot of spell casting options you might not have had otherwise. I'm not really sure how to use this guy. It seems to me like you're going to definitely have to build a deck where he is your planned finisher, where he's your planned like bomb to end the game. It seems like maybe some of the Morgan Landslide style decks could use this, since they tend to have lots of dudes who have at least 1 influence and they tend to be at their own deeds. So that I could see being pretty useful, especially since we already have Lillian as a huckster option, so potentially we have 2 hucksters, going to give us a lot of abilities to cast those spells late game. I don't know, this seems really, really insanely powerful to me. I'm just not exactly sure the right way to build a deck around him. I really do like that they're bringing the Whateleys back, or at least this Whateley back. I didn't play original Doomtown, but I had at least heard of them because they were just such an iconic part of the original game. Pretty excited about this guy. I'm hoping that we'll see some decks that are really based around capitalizing on his ability. It seems like you could really close out a game by dropping this guy and doing some noon boots, and suddenly the game's over. Well, that's going to do it for part 1 of my Faith and Fear review. Before I go, I want to talk briefly about what I think these dudes are going to do for the future of the game. I really thought that this box was going to be the make or break point for this game. And I thought that this box really needed to have a lot of good stuff going for it to continue the momentum of the game forward. And I absolutely think it delivers. This is definitely a make for me rather than break. I absolutely think that this box addresses some of the core problems that I've been having with the game, which is mostly that there are decks that can really lead to long, drawn-out stalemates. Especially the Morgan Landslide deck can really lead to some unfun, like 2-hour games of them just sitting there with like 500 influence and you can't beat them. There's just so many things that are going to make the gameplay more dynamic and interactive, and there's also going to be ways for the Morgan decks to actually close out the game. So I think that this box adds a lot to the game. It's going to make strategies that already exist more interactive and dynamic, and it's going to also contribute to new strategies, which is largely what we're going to talk about in the next video. So I'm really excited about this box. I think it's doing a lot of good things, and it's very well designed. I think this is a really good step in the right direction for the game. Well, I hope you liked this first part of the review, and make sure you tune into the second part where we're going to talk about all the rest of the cards in the box, including most of the miracles. So there's a lot of good stuff over there. Make sure you tune in, and if you like the video, please press subscribe and the button that looks like a thumbs up. I'll see you over in part 2.